Shu is an ugly, negative aura loser who lost his entire family to a mysterious demon. After partnering up with the demon baddie, they use the power of sucking faces to find the demon that made him an orphan. This story starts somewhere in Bayano City. While the civilians watched the mayor's broadcast, a pink-haired midget ran with her groceries until she got to Shu's home office and started making food. In a cafe that day, a mysterious boy was negotiating a deal with an agent, and Ayano was trying to hear their conversation. Distracted by the mannerless slob munching across from her, she told Shu to try eating normally, but he was too starved to be classy. When he finished and thanked her for the meal, she told him to consider returning to her company. He was already standing by then and told her he liked going solo before turning to leave. She got pissed and threatened to cancel the free meals, so he turned back and begged her to reconsider. Outside the cafe moments later, he thanked her again and was about to leave when she asked if she could contact him again. He then shamelessly pulled out his unpaid phone bill, and she grabbed it. After getting back home that night, he was heading to his room when a candle lit up, and he saw Kora, who almost gave him a heart attack. She had made a dinner out of veggies and told him to join her, but he told her he wasn't vegetarian and had already eaten. She turned away from him and said it was cool, but as he watched her remain still, he sensed danger and sat down to eat. After lying about the taste of the food to save his life, Kizura told him about school and asked why his place was slowly becoming a crack house. Noticing the shift in his mood, she gave him a hug to cheer him up, but then she smelled a girl's perfume on him. Sensing an immediate threat to his life, he said he had probably bumped into someone. Moments later, he was destroying his lungs while she cleaned up and asked about the light bill. He said he had run out of cash and would pay it after the next job, but then she offered to take care of it with all the money she had saved up. The next moment, a delivery for his Nintendo Switch came in, and he lied about it being a gift from an old friend. Later on, she told him it was time for the nightly post and forced him to take a picture that defines cringe. After uploading for her one and only follower, she took her perk pills and started complaining about money. He then promised to give her some after getting a new job, but she said he had been saying the same thing for the past couple of months while claiming he was waiting for a certain job auction. Just then, a notification came in with the offer he had been waiting for, so he put on the glasses before entering the virtual auction house with the other companies. After he got seated, Masaki welcomed them and began the briefing. Somewhere in the Legiston Hotel, a casino manager told officers Miles and Mikami about an intruder. The next moment, they heard gunshots and barged in to see a guy barely standing with his blood cells painting the room. The manager explained that they had security measures in place already, and Mikami told him the guy wasn't human, but that only made the manager excited to finally see a demon. The next moment, the guy's brain cells scrambled as his transformation began, and he revealed his true B-class demon form. The casino guards shot at him, but he handled the bullets like Neo, so they ran away and Mikami had to drag the overexcited manager out before the demon saw the security camera and smashed it. With the briefing complete, Masaki gave them stats on the suspect as well as the details of the job. The company owners got excited to take on the job, but Masaki told them the building was at the center of the entertainment district and not to be destroyed during the mission. With that, he gave them 10 minutes to place their bids, and by the end of it, Shu got the job after bidding at less than half the average price. The company owners got pissed at him for always messing up their chances at getting good jobs with his bids and took turns roasting him before leaving. He got on the phone with Yagiri moments later and agreed to give her 80% in exchange for backup. After telling her mom to stop getting her mixed up with him, Ayano left, and Shu got ready before heading out. After using the train and getting to the building late, Ayano got pissed at him, and he had to remind her that he was too broke to use an Uber. Moments later, they mobilized and got to the casino while discussing the plan. The demon broke down the door, and they saw its minions inside, so he told her to focus on them before heading in. They smoked all the minions, but the demon summoned more, so they kept shooting while he made his way to its back and gave her the signal. She used a special bullet on the demon, and as its blast distracted it, Shu got right behind it and blew out its back. The next moment, it tried to end him, as the shot had no effect. He managed to dodge the first attack, but ended up being too slow to escape a second time. Just then, its arm got cut off by Kora, who then checked on him and turned him into a proud simp. One of the officers suggested getting backup, but Ayano told him they wouldn't need it with Kizura being around. She immediately attacked the demon, but after trying to cut through its shield, she got tossed like a bag of chips. She got to her and asked if she was still feeling the effects of the pills, so she reminded him that they had not done the power ritual yet. After asking Ayano to cover them, he told her he didn't like doing it in public spaces, but she had already lost patience and pulled him in to take his mouth juices. As the ritual increased in intensity, Ayano started getting frustrated and told them to wrap it up. Just then, an explosion went off as she entered the zone and made the demon feel her aura. It summoned more minions to face her, but she easily cut through them and almost took out Ayano. As Shu regained consciousness and saw a reminder with a kiss bullet in his hand, the girls covered each other's backs, but then Kizora recognized the smell Shu came home with and tried to chop off Ayano's head. They both started fighting while taking out the demon's minions until Shu separated them. She then turned her anger on him and kept slicing until he fell, and she demanded a spare key to his place as proof of their love. He reminded her that she could just pass through the wall, but then she started trashing the place again, so he gave her the key. They then joined forces and cut through the demon's minions before combining their attacks and blasting it back to the underworld. Moments after, she tried starting another ritual, but he gave her its head for the memory extraction. She went to try again, but then the building started to collapse, so they all ran out, and she flew out to shatter the debris before it could harm civilians. Nights later, Kizora used the spare key to get in while Shu was sleeping and watched over him with a cultured look in her eye before dropping her uniform. The next morning, he got another veggie dish for breakfast and watched the news, where the hotel incident was being made to look like a structural problem. After, he looked through the images they pulled from the demon's memory and asked Kizora if she had seen anything more specific, but that was all she could extract. She then told him she was working on managing their finances to take better care of him, and saw that they needed to make money quickly to survive the month. He excitedly told her he was expecting the payment from the month's job, but she reminded him that their payments were usually sent out a month after the job. Before leaving, she told her that they would likely have to switch to eating grass, and moments later, she was at the train station looking up side jobs. Just then, her classmates showed up and asked about her job search. Remembering that she was dating a brokey, they were trying to ask about Shu when they saw the bandages on her body. She tried to convince them that it wasn't from Shu, but they didn't believe her and thought she had been brainwashed. They were talking about getting him arrested when a femboy who thought he was a Disney prince showed up. Achizuka grabbed Kisora's hand and promised to use his status as student council president and son of the mayor to solve all her problems. Ignoring the girls, he kept yapping about his dad's money, and didn't notice the girls getting on the train until they left. At a gym that night, the agent from the cafe was negotiating with a new client, and Shu was trying to ask Ayano for a job while staring at her melons. She reminded him of his wannabe Sigma speech at the cafe the other day, so he apologized, claiming he had learned his lesson. After telling him to get help from his demon girlfriend, he told her about Kisora's junky behavior and kept begging until she decided to call her mom. He got excited and grabbed her by the shoulders, and she tried hiding her obvious craving for his glizzy until she saw something that gave her a mood swing. Seeing the picture Kizora posted after putting him to sleep with her melons, he got scared, but Ayano had taken anger management classes and simply walked off. The next day, the city's elites showed up for the government's anniversary party, and while that was happening, Masaki told Linfa and Shenfa about a student named Yoshino, who vanished after hatching an elaborate plan to take out the mayor. The Anti-Demon Bureau had been suspecting him of being possessed by a demon and happened to stumble on his plans for the mayor during an investigation. He then offered to have bureau agents stand guard for the event, and they accepted, but before he left, they asked him to avoid repeating what happened with the hotel. He then met up with Yugiri and put her company in charge of the mission. Later that day, Shu was at the party keeping a lookout and had stepped out to discuss payment with Yugiri, when Miles nearly slapped his chest out. In the ballroom, Ayano was struggling with her tight gown while paying a lot of attention to Kizora. The midget demon became entranced by the food and was about to sneak some away when Achizuka gave her a jump scare. While he made her ears bleed with his chronic self-obsession, Shu shared a smoke with Miles, who filled him in on the details of the suspect. While they were talking, a demon watched them through the wall, and by the time he had sensed something, it was gone. Moments later, they saw the mayor about to give his speech, so Miles started heading back and told him to drop by for a meal like old times. With Shenfa puppeteering him from the background, the mayor opened with a brief crash course on the origins of their floating hyper-advanced city and promised them all successful lives. Kizura pointed out her very unsuccessful life, and Ayano reminded her that she just had bad taste in men. While they watched him, the demon who was obsessing over the city's dark truths came out through the wall behind him and attacked. Thankfully, Kizura got there in time and pulled him back through the wall while Linfa and Shenfa watched in horror. While the officers in Kizura chased it through the facility, Ayano took a second to restyle her gown. After passing through the floor to escape, Ayano tried to almost out his only eye, but then he entered the walls and tried attacking her. After Kizura dropped him, Ayano was about to finish him off when he said something that distracted her and ran away. An employee was enjoying his break when the demon crashed in, and Shu broke in from the window, wasting bullets. Moments later, he and Kizura had cornered him, and Shu was requesting orders from Yagiri. Their orders were to take the demon alive, so he started explaining to Kizura that Yoshino still had his human mind intact after getting possessed, which made him fit for interrogation. While Yoshino yapped about the mayor's lies, Shu had decided to order a net launcher with all the money they had left, and Kizura was trying to talk him out of it. Yoshino then said something about the government's ties to his family's murder, and used the distraction to escape. Shu was about to check out the launcher, but Kizura stopped him to ask if another month of eating grass was worth it. After saying he was starting to like being vegan, he paid for it, and seconds later, Yoshino reached the ground and got rammed into a wall by the delivery company. He got carried out on a stretcher shortly after, and Shu left with Kizura to begin another month of extreme poverty. In a dream, Cana walked through a cave looking for her parents that had become roadkill. After getting attacked, she started calling out to Shu, and he woke up in bed, glad he could still remember them before looking at their picture and seeing Kizura's attempt at joining the family. In a facility later on, a scientist was on the run with a core while security chased after him to retrieve it. After tripping, an agent reminded him of a contract, and he decided to go ahead with it after seeing he had no other option. Shortly after, the entire city experienced a blackout, but Shu and Kizura were already living off the grid and barely noticed. She was trying to figure out a way to get to school when a letter came in for him, and he told her to ditch. In the mayor's office later on, Masaki showed them a clip of the now transformed scientist at the North Plant and told them he was a spy likely trying to steal organium-related tech. The mayor didn't know what Masaki was talking about, so Shenfa reminded him that the city was built to refine and study the next-generation power source called organium, with the technology around it being protected by them. Several counties have been sending spies like the scientist over the years to get a piece of it. With the scientist's transformation and theft resulting in the blackout, Shenfa asked Linfa to figure out a good cover story. Their dad asked if he could help, so they made him stamp an approval letter to mobilize their forces. In a park much later, the agent was out jogging with his latest client, and they ran past Shu, who was at a bench with Ayano. He tried rizzing her up, but she had already lost patience after sneaking out of the office to see him and told him to get to the point. He showed her a picture of the scientist and another of the sign left after his transformation, which looked similar to the one from the hotel incident. With the job auction still an hour away, she asked him how he had already gotten information on the incident. She told him he was likely being exploited for his cheap but effective methods, and he told her he didn't mind as long as he could get more information for his mission. After asking her to tell Yagiri he would handle the job, he tried to sound like a Jigga Chad, so she started listing out his countless failures until he started begging. At the auction later on, he used the usual price slash to outbid the others, but then Yagiri showed up and spoke to Masaki. Shu had already gotten up to leave when Masaki canceled his bid and showed them a thermal image of the scientist, revealing that he had absorbed an organium core that could power the entire city for a week. The new demands were for the core to be retrieved without harming the scientist, so Masaki asked them to restart the bidding, and Shu went over to tell him he could handle it himself. Justice then explained that the new orders would be too much for him to handle. Moments later, Yagiri mobilized her company's forces, and Miles got to the car to tell Mikami they had finished the evacuation. Mikami was looking through information on Shu and asked Miles about the year he spent as Shu's foster parent. He told Miles he had respect for Shu as he was the city's most effective demon exterminator, but he struggled to understand why the other extermination companies didn't show him that same respect. While Yukiri's forces began the mission by trying to freeze the scientist, Miles told Mikami about how Shu had actually gotten a bounty placed on his head when he first got back 2 years ago with Kizura. The other companies joined forces to take them out, but they all got their ass whooped and ended up reluctantly agreeing to him having his own company. Just then, an explosion went off as the scientist had completed his metamorphosis. He then blew up the drones before taking flight, and Yukiri started trying to cook up a new strategy. After failing to come up with a solution, she called Shu, who was watching their failure from a rooftop. Ayano was with the forces on the ground, about to get clapped by the mutated butterfly. So she told him to handle the job and sent him the contract before telling Masaki they would have to give up on retrieving the core. The next moment, Kizura hugged him from behind and told him to start the ritual so they could face the possessed scientist. Shu then told her he had forgotten something about Ayano, and she told him the dress she was wearing at the park was actually from their first date together. After shutting her up with his mouth juices, he told her to take as much of his memories as she needed, so she started sucking them out until her powers activated. Ayano had crashed at the time and was about to become ground beef, but Kisara made it in time to protect her before attacking the scientist. By the time she managed to crack into the core, Shu woke up and saw the reminder she had left him, so he loaded the gun with a kiss bullet before looking at his family's picture to remember them. Once she exposed the center of the core, Shu took the shot and pierced it, but it survived and started charging up for a counterattack. Shu then loaded up for his second shot and blasted right through it before collapsing from exhaustion. At a warehouse by the docks several nights later, Ayano and her subordinates made their way in and found a bunch of people on their way to heaven before getting blasted by a possessed machine gun slinger. After a sniper took him out, they blew up the place and moments later, reinforcements arrived to take him in. While the survivors were being carried away, Miles was telling Ayano to stop blowing up buildings when Tony was wheeled out, and she recognized him from the park. Later on, she met with Linfa for dinner and thanked her for the help with the core incident. After Linfa told her they were still scheduling blackouts until a new core could be synthesized, she asked for another favor and showed her a picture of Tony. Linfa didn't like the idea of having to beg the chief of police again, but she agreed to do it for an extra wine bottle. After saying goodbye shortly after, Ayano was about to head back inside when Linfa asked about Shu, and she tripped. She then roasted Ayano for falling in love with a younger guy and still getting dumped before leaving. The next day, Shu looked at the picture from the hotel demon's memories before heading down with Kizora and promising to take her out for dinner. When they got to the entrance, Hachizuka came out of his limo and started his narcissistic simping over Kizora. After Shu told him to save his press school pickup lines for someone else, Hachizuka got up and started asking about the abusive rumors he had been hearing about. Shu didn't exactly deny the allegations, so he grabbed him by the collar and started threatening to get him locked up. Kizora then saw Ayano in a car with Mikami and followed them until they stopped outside a hotel. After Hachizuka gave Shu his card to show him who he was, he noticed that Kizora had left and saw something on his phone before leaving Hachizuka to continue his creepy yapping. Moments later, he was at a park staring at a post Kizora had made about Ayano and Mikami. Mikami then introduced himself and showed them his ID and badge. He told them Tony was a member of the Orcas Mafia who recently took down some members of the Serpent gang using demon powers. Ayano had told him about seeing Tony at the park, and Shu also remembered seeing him. Mikami then told him they were trying to track down the agent who they had figured was the one convincing people into signing contracts with demons. Hearing all that, Shu got pissed at Ayano for trying to run the investigation behind his back despite knowing that he had been searching for a lead like that for years. Just then, Mikami got a call from the office revealing that Tony had been sent to his ancestors. At the hospital later on, evidence collection was underway, and Miles told Mikami it was a retaliation from Serpent before showing him the weapon they used on him. Later on, Ayano was trying to get a lead on Yoshino at the cafe from before. Outside the cafe, she saw Shu, who also had the same idea after remembering that Yoshino was the kid who was signing a contract with the agent that day at the cafe. He tried joining her to get more leads, but she refused to pair up, so he apologized for getting pissed again. She then got upset and told him to go find Kizora instead of faking an apology since he preferred working with her. She reminded him about the time she wanted to surprise him for his birthday, but he didn't come back until the next day and did the fake apology thing after chasing leads. Realizing that he had lost his memories of that day, he started apologizing and she started crying before running off. At the time, Miles and Mikami had mobilized units outside the Serpent hideout. Mikami decided to head in, expecting to find the guy that put Tony to sleep, but what he found was a pool of body fluids as the gang members had also been sent to the afterlife. Shortly after, Ayano was under a bridge crying and suddenly heard Kisara, who then started telling her the exact details of the night she was telling Shu about. They sat at a small shop under the bridge to eat, while Kizora told her everything about her contract with Shu. At the time, he was at a bench smoking, and was trying to use the ashtray when an arrow struck with a message regarding the serpent hideout. In Mayor's office, Masaki explained that the Orcus had sent another possessed member to take revenge for Tony and asked Yukiri to send in a team. Mikami and Miles were outside the Orcus hideout with their units, trying to decide on a plan when Shu rode in on a bike and went straight into the basement. Inside, Frankenstein's sister had just taken out the last gang member when Shu blasted her with bullets and chased her into the bathroom. Using the reflections, she tried to take him out, but he kept shooting until she eventually ran out of mirrors to hop through. Mikami had made it in by then and was telling him to stop stealing the spotlight when Miles asked why the possessed lady who was meant to be a part of the gang was taking out her comrades. With his last breath, the gang member mentioned Maria's name, and they remembered that she was Tony's girlfriend. They then realized that the massacres were actually her way of taking revenge on everyone connected to what happened with Tony, and at that moment, Ayano became her next target. She managed to dodge the first attack and tried reaching for her gun, forgetting she wasn't geared up. Before Maria could land the second strike, Kisara blocked it and gave Shu their location before tossing a gun to Ayano and chasing Maria. When they got to the road, Maria was gone, so Shu told them to look out for any mirrors. Just then, Maria came out of the reflection behind Ayano, and this time she managed to pull the gun. But Maria was faster and cut the gun out of her hand. After catching it and pumping her full of bullets, Maria had escaped through the traffic mirror, and Kisara tried to follow but got trapped. Ayano then told her she could see crap stains on her special garments. Moments later, she got there with the officers, and Ayano thanked her for the gun, but Kisara told her they had still not paid for it, as the delivery girl was still waiting. Later on, Mikami was at a diner with Shu and told him Ayano had been taken to a safe house. He then started asking about Shu's source, as he had received the intel on Maria's rampage minutes after it was reported, which meant the source was likely one of the higher-ups. At the time, Yukiri had made it to the safe house to give Ayano some clothes and sat across from her without looking, to avoid having Maria explode through her eyeballs. Back at the diner, Mikami told Shu about an explosion that claimed 53 lives at the first Orgonium mine, located on the ocean floor 12 years ago. Shu knew the story was a cover-up, so Mikami got to the real truth. Since the city was founded, there were problems with people getting possessed to gain power, and Shu's dad, who was a disaster prevention expert, blamed it on the Orgonium core. An inspection with top officials was scheduled for that day, and they all took their families expecting it to be a nice field trip. But then disaster struck and sucked away everyone but Shu. At the safe house, Yukiri was also telling Ayano about the incident and explained that the people got frustrated looking for someone to blame. They ended up pointing fingers at Shu's dad and made him out to be a terrorist that wanted the demons to take over. Mikami knew that Shu was taking intel from the mysterious source out of desperation to figure out what happened that day, but he also suspected the source of being linked to everything. He then asked Shu to partner up with him instead, which came as a surprise, since Shu didn't think anyone believed in his dad's innocence. The next day, Miles told Mikami he was also surprised by his son's support for Shu, and told him about the year they lived together. Mikami then pulled up a photo of Junya, the agent they had been looking for, and discussed the interrogation plan. After getting to his place, Miles realized that it was right across from Shu's place. They didn't get a response after knocking, so they went in and found what used to be Junya. Taking a closer look, Mikami saw that it had just happened, and Miles showed him a message the culprit left on the wall. At the safe house shortly after, Ayano was slurping down juice box number 20 when she heard someone and thought it was Yagiri. After seeing Shu, she had a panic attack and quickly got dressed before sitting with him to talk about everything. He told her he wasn't giving up on his hunt for the truth, and she told him to consider the fact that his dad might have actually been involved. After telling her he was still going to find out the truth, she asked if he had only joined their company and dated her to receive training from her mom, who was once a student of his dad. When he said he did it because he actually wanted her, she got closer. Later that day, it had started to rain and the lights had gone out, so they leaned on each other's backs. While the water was slowly dropping in, he told her there was a secret he had managed to keep from everyone, including Kisara, and she didn't believe him until he said Cana could still be alive. After, he had told her about the dreams he started having of her months before he quit from her mom's company. With demons typically communicating through dreams, he suspected that she had been abducted by one. Ayano then got off him and said she would stop trying to interfere with his attempts to find her. The next moment, she started kissing him and pushed him down before saying she wanted one final pounding. While he rearranged her guts, the rain kept pouring, and moments later, Maria popped out from one of the drops. She sliced the couch in half, but missed them as they were elsewhere clapping with every style known to man. Kizura suddenly attacked her, but she got away, so Kizura went to say hi to Ayano with her skull. Knowing what she had done with Shu, she couldn't hold back the tears while telling Ayano to take cover before heading back out. As Maria littered the entire safe house with reflective glasses, Shu was watching and suddenly felt Kisura's sword on his back. She said it was her turn and immediately jumped him to perform the mouth juice ritual until she powered up and went to face Maria. While they clashed swords at the speed of sound, Ayano woke Shu up and realized that he had forgotten their hour-long clapping session. Kisura had dropped her guard and was about to get clapped when Shu drove his elbow into Maria and pushed her back. He then threw Kisura's kiss bullet into her chest, and she used her sword to drive it in, blowing Maria up in the process. The next day, Shu was at a park bench ruining his lungs when Mikami showed up and told him about Junya. Their analysis revealed that the culprit was a human trying to make it look like it was Maria, and Mikami suspected their mystery informant of having ties to it. Meanwhile, Kizura was on the way back from grocery shopping when she saw Ayano and reminded her of the decision she made to stop interfering. With Shu's memories gone again, she decided to take it back and told Kizura to pick up a few lessons from his memories of her throat game. Over a week later, a nun named Sharon found the Legiston Hotel after carrying around a photo from the night Kizura destroyed it. Later that day, Ayano was at Shu's place, showing off her wifey qualities, hoping he would notice but barely paid her any attention. She then asked about Kizura, and he told her she had gone MI, since the fight with Maria. He couldn't take any jobs without her, so Ayano tried convincing him to tag along for her latest job, but he declined, claiming a D-class was too weak for him. Shortly after, Sharon had infiltrated the company's communication systems and heard the briefing on the location of the D-class demon before entering a cab to get there. Kisura was under a bridge at the time and kept ignoring the texts he was sending. A couple of years back, Shu entered a cave in the winter and found her turned to stone by her sword. After pulling it out, he was trying to check on her when she charged at him and kept slashing until she pinned him to the wall by his throat. When he said he wanted to clap her, the stone curse broke off, and as she was trying to focus on the memory, she got a notification. Ayano had posted a picture from her cleaning session, and it had more likes than all of Kisura's posts combined, so she tossed her phone. At the time, Justice had gotten to the abandoned building with his sidekick, but then they'd found the demon already neutralized. They were trying to figure out what happened when he saw Sharon at the last moment and tossed his sidekick into a pillar as she crashed in. He tried to talk to her, and she responded by trying to kick his brains out. After blocking a lot of kicks, he caught her leg and asked if he could spread it, but then she put his head in a leg lock. She was trying to ask about the hotel photo when reinforcements showed and started emptying their clips into them. He was trying to block the bullets when she kicked him into the officers and jumped out the window. She then got into his car and found access cards to the company before leaving with the car. She was on a train later on, still trying to text Kisura, and got off at the next station. He sat on a bench and was looking at the text he sent to the mystery informant when they showed up. While he was asking the informant questions about who they were, Mikami and Miles were listening in. They told him to check the garbage bin, and he found a pad with footage from Sharon's clash with Justice. He was reviewing the footage when the informant mentioned something about the Celestial Abbey and tried escaping into the crowd. Shu chased them into a series of halls, but the informant ran through a false wall at the last moment and escaped. Shortly after, he was at the auction with the rest of the company owners trying to figure out who Sharon was. Masaki was still not sure why a nun was attacking low-budget demon slayers like them, so he told them to exercise caution. After the others left, Shu mentioned the Celestial Abbey to Yakiri, and she recognized the name. It belonged to a philanthropic church posing as equal rights activists for the masses. In reality, they were a global collective of insanely strong exorcists that had been eating demons for breakfast over a millennia. Later that night, Yakiri was heading out while on the phone with Ayano when she saw a shadow approaching and put her guard up. Seeing it was Sharon, she relaxed and asked what she wanted. Sharon tossed the pic of Kisura and asked for her whereabouts, but Yakiri had a few guesses about why she was looking for her and refused to give her the info. Sharon was about to pound it out of her when Ayano crashed through a window and started blasting. She almost made her mum disabled and ignored her complaints to keep shooting at Sharon, who charged straight for her and kicked the gun away. After almost smashing Ayano's head into a wall, She recognized her and gave her a nasty liver shot before asking if she was still Shu's. Ayano forgot she was in a fight and started yapping. So Yukiri took over and asked Sharon why she didn't mention knowing Shu in the first place. She asked for his location again, and they refused, so she stole Ayano's phone and dipped. They tried chasing after her and found the company's security guards knocked out across the hall. Moments later, Kizura's phone started blowing up with text from Ayano's number, so she checked it and immediately recognized Sharon. At the time, Shu was heading back after buying enough cigarettes to poison a grown elephant. He got a call from Yukiri and heard Ayano, who explained what had happened just as he got to the door. He dropped the cigarettes and pulled out his gun, but then his door got blasted out and pushed him out the window. After Sharon got down, he tried running to grab the gun, but Sharon got to it first. After a body shot and a kick that put him in flight mode, she secured him with her sacred drumsticks and reminded him of who she was. With his memories still in limbo, he told her he didn't remember, so she started pounding it into him. The next moment, she sensed an attack and dodged Kisura's sword before getting roasted for having abandonment issues. Seeing her sword, Sharon reminded her of what happened in the cave. Sharon was working with Shu at the time and ran the sword through her spine, but then Kisura kept attacking until Shu shot her. Sharon then kicked her into a wall with the sword keeping her in place until she passed out. While Shu continued his nap, the girls fought, and Sharon almost clapped Kisura with her shoe blade before taking a break to compliment her. Before they could continue, they found themselves in a drive-by situation as Ayano pulled up with armed officers. Sharon then promised to pay her another visit soon and hopped into the night. Kisura immediately ran over to wake Shu up, but he didn't respond, so she tried using her mouth juices to wake him. But Ayano stopped her and almost pulled out her scalp. In a dream, Cana was begging Shu to save her, so he called Kisura and told her to do it. After touching the weapon, they both became pixie dust, and he immediately forgot about them. He was in a hospital bed at the time, and the girls were watching over him. Kisura asked Ayano if she was okay, and she said she was doing a lot better than the company officers that all came close to kicking the bucket. At the time, Yukiri and Masaki were looking through Sharon's data with Mikami and Miles before discovering that Sharon was among the 12 elite nuns known as the Living Relics. Masaki considered getting help from her to deal with the demons in the city, but working with her global organization would end up showing the world the truth about the city's demon infestation and give other countries a reason to pry into the orgonium mining. Back at the hospital, Ayano asked Kisura to explain what happened with Sharon after the cave incident. She told her that Sharon wanted to put her in permanent sleep, but Shu needed her alive for his mission, so that night, while he was working out with her, she was trying to stab him in the back. Just then, she got paralyzed as he had coated his glizzy in poison before the workout to make sure it hit the right spots. Seeing that he was stable, Kisura got up to leave and was on the way out when Ayano stopped her to ask why he didn't remember Sharon. Kisura reminded her of the convenient memory-sucking ability she had, and Ayano freaked out, asking if there were more poison-induced workouts she had made him forget. But Kisura made no comment and left. Shu had actually been up the whole time and started trying to figure out where it all went wrong. That night, Sharon used a jet ski to get to a cargo ship, where she took out the guards before busting open a container with a mech suit. After dropping her sacred garments, she got sucked into the suit. The next day, Miles and Mikami were on the ship trying to figure out what she had taken. After one of the evidence collectors found what he said was a demon's muscle fibers, they went to see Masaki after confirming that it was, in fact, the body of a demon. Masaki told them the Celestial Abbey had created a fake company to transport the body, and they started trying to figure out why she needed it. Remembering that Shu was doing the same thing with a still-breathing demon, they realized that she wanted to use it against Kisura. Remembering the text Sharon sent her the previous night, Kisura got to the location and called her to pull up for the fight. Sharon was already there, so Kisura looked around until she looked up right as Sharon started blasting. After she dodged the concrete shattering shots, Sharon jumped down to show her the new look. Kisura called her a weak for getting protection and charged in while blocking the bullets until she made contact. After one of the bullet wounds closed up, Kisura tried to flex on her. But then, Sharon activated the demon's muscle fibers, and Kisura started dodging until one of them got her right above the knee. At the hospital later on, Ayano went to see Shu, but he had already left through the window. Back at the abandoned building, Kisura was running for dear life and hid behind a pillar to switch to verbal combat while tying up her injury. After Sharon's tentacles found her and cornered her from both sides, Sharon came up for the finishing move. Kisura tried to fight back, but Sharon had already blasted a tentacle through her spine. After she fell, Sharon slowly walked over to finish her off, but then an explosion went off and Kizora woke up moments later and saw Shu. She remembered her anger towards him and started pouting, so he reminded her of the litters of blood leaking out of her and said they had to do the ritual. She stopped him to ask if he had saved her from Sharon that night just so he could use her or because he actually cared. He tried avoiding the question, but she kept asking, so he shut her up with a smooch, but she still pushed him back. He then told her to stop making things hard and tried again, but she refused, so he told her it was because she was the only demon that made his sword rise. After the stickiest fluid exchange they had ever done, she got healed up, and Sharon blasted in moments later before seeing her ready for the final round. She started shooting again, but this time Kizora was too fast and cut off the gun, so Sharon took a step back and told her Shu was using her. Kizora told her his sausage was worth it and charged in as Sharon activated the fibers again. Seeing that Kizora was too strong for the fibers, Sharon tried to take out Shu, but Kizora stopped it and shattered the fibers with her hand before using waves of slashes to break her mech suit apart. Kizora then charged in for the final attack that sent them both through all the floors in the building. Moments later, Miles and Mikami showed up and struggled to maintain focus after seeing Sharon's divine plot. Shu was awake by then and asked Kizora about Sharon as he had lost the memory, but she told him to forget about it before deciding to go back home with him. Later that night, Sharon was in the interrogation room telling Mikami that the Celestial Abbey was taking interest in the city as a demon, far beyond what they had ever dealt with, was planning to make an entrance. Days later, in a part of the abandoned Orgonium mine, a mysterious man walked over to the staff from Shu's dreams, and a girl chained up behind the rock before a tattoo on his arm started to glow. At Shu's place later on, the Junya investigation was back on, and Mikami had new clues to focus on. They had figured that Junya was working for an active demon that stayed behind the scenes, but judging by how fast he got clapped after they found out about him, there was definitely another middleman. The new guy likely had access to top-level information, which explained how he was able to quickly take out Junya, so they suspected that the true agent was also the mysterious informant. Miles still had doubts, as he couldn't understand why the agent was making people sign up to become demons just to hand them over to Shu and Kizora. They then asked Shu about the first time he met the informant, but his clap-induced amnesia had already deleted that memory. While they were talking, the informant was right outside, listening in his car, but then Ayano pulled up, so he left. By then, Mikami had written out the names of their suspects, and as they were thinking about it, Kizora claimed to have figured it out and circled Ayano's name. She was convinced it was either her or Ryugiri, and Shu tried talking her out of it. But then Mikami had a thought. Ryugiri had worked with the police department before and was involved with the creation of the Anti-Demon Bureau, so ruling her out wasn't an option. Shu was trying to tell them that Ayano didn't have enough brain cells to pull off such a plan when he realized she had heard him. Moments later, she had crossed out her name and demanded an explanation from Shu, so the guys tried bailing him out. She then yelled at Kizora for spinning crazy theories, but Kizora was too focused on her first attempt at making actual food. Shortly after, he was with Ryugiri and Masaki, directly asking if they were the suspects they were looking for. After clearing their names, it all came down to the Director General, but when he asked about who it was, Masaki told him the director was a mysterious fellow that none of them had actually seen before. When Shu asked how they were comfortably working for a mystery man, Ryugiri told him she was sure the general was a human with immense hatred for demons. He was the one who made it possible for Shu and Kizora to be allowed to join the bureau, despite the tensions rising at the time. She then told him there was a suspect he was missing, and shortly after that, he was outside Carol's cell, explaining that Kizora was outside waiting for a reason to send her to heaven. She then showed him the ropes used to tie her up and promised to be good, so he asked about the demon she had mentioned during the interrogation. He wanted to know if the demon was the same one they were searching for, and she responded by saying she had already told him before. It was during one of their workouts, so Kizora most likely removed the memory. She then told him the demon's name was Asmodeus. The true agent they were searching for worked for Asmodeus and freely moved around, as he was still fully human. He asked if the Celestial Abbey could help, but all she did was give him a hint, suggesting that the true agent was always close to the damage he was causing. At the police station that night, Miles was ready to leave and asked Mikami to come with, but he wanted to hang back to look through a few things. After Miles left, Mikami looked through the list again until he suddenly realized something and checked on the computer. As he ran out, the informant was right by the corner, watching. After getting to the car, he tried to call Shu, but it went to voicemail as he drove off. Shu got the voicemail and listened to hear what Miles had found, but he ended up listening to Miles' final moments, as someone had caught him lacking and smoked him. Moments later, they got to the station and found him in the car. Just then, they saw the informant running and immediately chased after him until they cornered him. He then took off his disguise and turned out to be Hachizuka. Shu asked if he was the shooter, but he denied it and pulled out a card, claiming he was actually the director, so Shu knocked him out. Moments later, he was tied up in Shu's place with a gun to his head as Shu demanded answers. He was explaining how his Prince Charming routine was a cover-up when Kizora interrupted to tell him the only thing he charmed was probably his brain-rot sisters. After saying he wasn't behind Mikami's permanent retirement, Shu stuffed his mouth with the Glock and threatened to blow his brains out. Shortly after, they were at City Hall, and Shu was getting frustrated again, so he took them into an elevator and entered the command for a secret floor. On way down, he told Shu that all their suspects were completely innocent, and Shu wanted to know how he knew, so he showed them his surveillance floor. They had cameras everywhere and on everyone in the entire city, so he had been paying extra attention to the suspects and any other suspicious person. Shu and Kizora were a bit more worried about him spying on his sister's plot, but he said it was necessary to protect the city. After pulling up a video of the shooting, he told them the shooter was always covered up, which made it impossible to know who he was. Days later, he thanked Ayano for showing up to help review the videos, but she was worried about him. After telling her he wanted to focus on finding the shooter, he noticed something shocking in the footage. Later on, they all went for Mikami's funeral, and on the way out, Miles offered to give him a ride. During the ride home, they started talking about Mikami and the times they spent with him. Suddenly, Shu told Miles that he knew he was a shooter, and the tattoo on his arm lit up. Earlier on that day, Shu and Yugiri met up with Hachizuka to discuss what he had found. They had discovered that Miles was the first on the scene at all the recent incidents with possessed people, but Hachizuka didn't see that as enough reason. They then told him about his arm tattoo, which had been identified by the officers after they interrogated recently possessed individuals in the city. At the time, 2 trucks with Yugiri's company and the girls were tailing them, and Miles got excited, thinking he was about to star in a Fast and Furious special. He asked Shu about the price put on his head, but all Shu knew was that Yugiri won the auction. Moments later, Hachizuka called Masaki, upset over the fact that Yugiri set a bid of $1 to win. Before the auction, he had planned to exclude Yugiri and Shu from the takedown, and told Masaki to let the other companies secure the bid at any price, deciding that he would later compensate. With the plan failing, Yugiri told him his worries about them having trouble facing Miles were not necessary, as they were used to turning on former partners. Yugiri then grabbed the phone and accused Hachizuka of wanting to exclude Shu because he actually knew where his family was and didn't want Miles to tell him. Before she could finish asking him about it, he hung up and smashed his phone in anger. Just then, an officer came to deliver more bad news, as Sharon had apparently escaped captivity. By then, Shu was walking Miles down to his execution and wanted to know how he could betray him after all the years spent together. Hearing him talk reminded him of Mikami, who had finally put 2 and 2 together after taking 2 rounds to the chest. He remembered that Miles had a daughter who had a terrible illness that went as far as putting her into cardiac arrest, but she miraculously got better shortly after the mine explosion with Shu's dad. By then, they had gotten to a clearing, and Shu was getting ready to smoke him while Yukiri's company got into position. Before starting the execution, Shu demanded an apology for everything Miles had done, but then he started laughing. After activating his contract, he told Shu he had no regrets and transformed into his demon form. Moments later, the officers were emptying their clips on him and Ano, directed their firepower. Shu, on the other hand, was going through the motions, so Kizora had to remind him that they were the only ones capable of taking out Miles without risking their lives. Most of the officers had already been taken out, and Ayano was still shooting until Miles nearly skinned her with his chains. Just then, Sharon showed up and ran her bike into Miles before using her shoe blade to cut through his arm. After tearing through his eye, he healed up and was about to punch her straight to paradise, but Ayano used her bullets to push his fist back. She then put a gun to Sharon's head and demanded answers, but before she could finish calling her ungrateful, Miles interrupted them. Shu told Kizora he had helped her escape, so she could help them in exchange for her freedom and access to Miles' memories. He then told Kizora to suck out all his memories of Miles, but she reminded him of what Sharon once said about the dangers of losing so many memories. While he decided to accept the risk and began the ritual, the girls had both been knocked down and were about to become ground beef, but Kizara showed up on time to save them. She then took over and kept Miles on his toes with her insanely fast attacks while blocking all of his. Seeing that they had become useless spectators, Inanno asked Sharon for a duel, but she turned it down, explaining that she wasn't the type to beat up Sakura-level fighters. The next moment, Shu woke and saw a reminder telling him what Miles had done. By then, Kizara was still holding out against him and finally managed to pierce his back. After removing her sword, they both took a second to breathe, but then, when he charged in, he blew past her and told her to take care of Shu, which left her stunned. He charged straight for Shu, who could only see red at that point, and loaded up his gun before charging up and popping him. Over a decade ago, Miles was washing his car at home when Shu's dad came to see him after getting a recommendation from Yukiri. Later on, they told him about the existence of demons in the city, but he didn't believe them until the night Ogata first took one down in front of him. Over the years, they all became inseparable, and their families also grew, but then, his daughter fell ill. Ogata met him in the hospital one day after finding out that the Orgonium core was attracting the demons. Ogata was setting up the investigation at Hive Mind 3 and wanted him to come, but he decided to drop out of the case to support Melissa. Later that night, a mysterious person told him she could be saved, and he realized he wasn't talking to an actual person. He went to the mine shortly after and swapped places with Yukiri before heading inside. At the time, only Ogata was still conscious and struggled to understand what Sayuri meant by saying she was a demon that only clapped him to give birth to Cana, who would become the gate between the human and demon world. After Ogata collapsed, Miles got there and grabbed Shu before telling Sayuri, who was actually Asmodeus, to spare Shu. He was on his way out of the mine when it exploded, and 3 days later, he woke up in a hospital and Yukiri told him no one else survived. He then sat up and remembered that Ogata was the one who blew up the mine, but decided to keep it to himself. The next moment, a nurse told him his daughter had suddenly recovered, and shortly after that he returned home with Shu. Later that day, he got a letter from Asmodeus reminding him that he still had work to do and now had the demon living in his subconscious. After pulling out the memories, Kizura told Shu that Miles had apologized, but he still didn't know who he was and was asking for more when he suddenly remembered. Miles had apologized to him right before he shot him, but he still didn't have the full picture and couldn't understand why he was crying. Days later, the city's tremor watch was picking up seismic activity miles away from the city. The earthquakes were coming from Cana, who was still chained up in the mine. At the company building later on, Kizura was protecting Shu's eyes from Sharon, who was starting to look like the nun from that video with Johnny Sins. They had decided to make her live in the company to protect her from every law enforcement personnel gunning for her in the city. Remembering the second part of her agreement with Shu, she asked Kizura about the memories she had sucked out of Miles. Moments later, she told them everything but added the spin that made it sound like the explosion was also a part of Asmodeus' plan. Inanno got excited hearing that Shu's dad was innocent, but he was still struggling to remember what they were talking about. Yukiri asked for Asmodeus' motives, but Kizura didn't find anything on that in the memories, so Inanno asked why Miles had decided to save only Shu. Sharon interrupted them and pulled up images of Asmodeus' contract and the bodies the demon had used over the years. The Celestial Abbey was trying to figure out why it came to the city 12 years ago, and Yukiri remembered that it was around the time Ogata discovered that the Orgonium core was attracting demons. His move to start an investigation was why Asmodeus targeted him in the first place. Inanno then asked Kizura about her memories of the mine, and Sharon could tell she was hiding something. Outside the room moments later, Inanno promised to help find Cana, but then Shu seemed to have only just remembered who she was and said something out of pocket before running away. Later on, Kizura was on a boat with Sharon after making a deal with her to save Cana on her own, so she wouldn't have to cause more harm to Shu. In the city shortly after, Inanno picked up Linfa and handed over a file with an image of what used to be the location of the mine before it sank. Linfa told her the area was off-limits to avoid a second disaster, but then Inanno told her to look at the second image of an empty ocean floor that had no trace of the supposedly sunken mine. Inanno then asked for what actually happened to the mine. Back on the boat, Sharon showed Kizura a map of all the places Asmodeus had caused disasters over the years. The emblem was a giant magic circle, and the final point was where he did the last ritual before vanishing with all the people that lived in the village. After cross-referencing the circle with the demon events that took place in the city, they found the current final point, and Sharon revealed that it was the current location of the mine. After getting on an empty bridge, Linfa tried to tell Ayano that they had the people's best interests at heart. Ayano then told her she knew about how they had basically moved the entire city, which was technically a floating island, away from the mine so they could comfortably abandon everything about it. Before Linfa could justify what they did, Ayano put a gun to her head and asked for Cana's location in the mine. Linfa was trying to explain that she wasn't in charge of that case when they saw a military tank and she swerved to dodge the missile. Seeing the other company owners, Ayano accused Linfa of being a snitch, but Linfa had already crapped her pants thinking she was about to get smoked. Back on the boat, Sharon explained that Asmodeus had actually swapped places with Shu's actual mom to give birth to Cana, which explained why it only took her. They last saw the demon 16 years ago, and guessed it had made the switch around that time to keep them running around in circles. Kisora then asked her what the demon wanted, and she told her its mission was to merge both the demon and human worlds into one. Cana was going to be used as the gate to both worlds, but the explosion Ogata had caused ended up sending Asmodeus back to the demon world. It then used Miles to set off the demon possessions that had been slowly reactivating Cana in the mine to prepare for its return. They had made it to the location of the mine by then and got ready to find Cana. Meanwhile, at the bridge, Ayano tried turning back to escape, but Justice was on the other side to stop her. They gave her one chance to surrender to avoid being made to turn her into roadkill, and revealed that her mom had already been taken into custody. Achizuka then hacked into the car to speak with Linfa, before telling Ayano to surrender. Seeing no other option for escape, she decided to turn herself in, but then they saw a gunship being piloted by Shu, and Yukiri told her to get on it. After Linfa sent her the coordinates, she tried using her smile to erase the fact that she had put a gun to her head before leaving with Shu. Frustrated, Hachizuka then told Masaki about a satellite weapon from the Cold War he had bought and planned to use to destroy the mine. By then, Sharon and Kizara were in the mines and finally found Cana still chained up. The next moment, Kizara blocked a dropkick from Sharon that didn't really surprise her. Sharon told her Cana was too dangerous to be left alive, but Kizara refused to give her up. Masaki tried talking Hachizuka out of using the satellite as Kizara would get caught up in the blast, but it was too late as he had already activated it. The moment the girls started fighting, Cana began to open up, and Asmodeus's arm came through her back. Just then, Shu and Ayano got in wronged as the laser blast torched the island. The next moment, it stopped, and Masaki reminded him that it was a very old piece of equipment. But then they watched in shock as the single arm that was now the size of a colossal titan rose up. Kizara had made it out with Sharon, but it immediately attacked them, and she tried to dodge while holding onto her. After letting go, they both started fighting off the hands, and Shu told Ayano to take over the controls. After Sharon got smacked down, they both watched as Asmodeus created sand zombies out of the people's bodies he had used over the years. Kizara tried to fight, but then she got snatched up and was slowly getting crushed while zombie Sayuri strangled her. Shu then shot a hole through her, but it healed up, so he emptied the clip into her, causing her to disintegrate. He then grabbed Kizara, who realized that he didn't even recognize his mom, and told her to take out the rest of his memories. She was telling him why she didn't want to do it when a spear went through her, and he saw Cana coming through a portal. The moment Kizara grabbed the spear, she saw memories from Shu's childhood. Just then, Asmodeus's arm began to disintegrate, so Ayano took the gunship close enough for him to jump off. After Kizara told him to leave, he still tried to help, but then Sharon grabbed him before getting to the chopper. After the arm fully disintegrated, Kizara turned back and was shocked to see Cana in her demon form. She grabbed the spear again and realized that Cana was looking through the memories she had absorbed from Shu. After Cana absorbed the spear and memories of Shu, Kizara charged to attack, but then she remembered a childhood photo of Cana and froze. Cana then used the opening to blow her up, and she fell into the ocean. Ayano was trying to get them close enough to save her when Cana almost blew up the chopper, but stopped after seeing Shu. The next moment, she was torched by the satellite laser as Hachizuka had decided to save them from her. He immediately told them to charge up for another blast, and while Cana was slowly cooking, something escaped through the hole in her back. She then also fell into the ocean several hundred feet away from where Kizara was floating. Later that day, news of the island was already being broadcasted, and Sharon hoped they could find a way to cover it up. She then went to Kisara's room to see how she was doing, and Ayano told her she was still completely unresponsive. The cut from Cana's spear was also not healing as it should, so they didn't know what to do. Ayano then asked about Cana, and she told them the Celestial Abbey satellite had found her sleeping on the ocean floor. She told Ayano that Cana could be trained to use her power for good, but at the time, she had already been tagged an S-class demon by the Celestial Abbey. With Kisara taking an indefinite break from work, the only line of defense they had in case Cana came back was going to be Hachizuka's responsibility. He was with his sisters at the time, realizing that a volcano eruption was not good enough to be a cover-up story. After arguing with Linfa over almost getting her head shot off, Shenfa asked if he had made any plans regarding Cana. Linfa then told them who Cana was, so they hoped she could at least communicate like Kisara. Elsewhere in the city, the other company owners were discussing the pay split after merging their units to take out several demons that suddenly showed up. Justice then told them the demons were minions that came out of Cana and suggested taking her out with a joint mission that would get them set for life. The idea of going up against an S-class demon was a lot, so they spent the rest of the evening weighing their options to see if it was worth the risk. At the hospital later on, Shu grabbed Kisara's hand and started begging her to come back, promising to abandon everything for her. She woke up at that moment, and he immediately grabbed her. But then she pulled back to ask if she could take the rest of his memories. After reminding her that it was part of the deal, they started the ritual, but then his memories started coming back, and he tried to stop, but she grabbed him and kept going. Before they met, Shu broke the news of his plans to leave the city to Ayano. She started crying, thinking she was the reason, but he told her he needed to get stronger to figure out what happened to his family. He tracked down Sharon shortly after that to ask about a distant relative his dad had told him about that was sealed in a cave. After offering her a partnership, they found Kisara, but Sharon wanted her dead, so he poisoned his sausage before putting it in her sacred buns. He then took Kisara away to figure out a way to get into a contract with her. After reading through and seeing that he could offer memories instead of his soul, he finished the preparations and offered her some memories to get started. She plucked it out of his head, causing him immense pain, before she said her first word and told him she had seen the styles he used on Sharon. They went back to Baron City after that and started taking out demons together. After getting his license from beating all the other companies, Ayano got pissed at him for sacrificing himself to make Kisara stronger, but he assured her of a plan he was making to escape. Later on, he made a new contract and told Kisara to read through it so they could start by using the new ritual that night. Hours later, she had actually read the whole thing and realized something was missing. So she flipped through the pages and saw the last rule he had added to make it so that he could get out of giving up his memories. That night, he got ready for the new ritual, but then she suddenly pulled his face up for some oral mix-up. When she said that was the new ritual, he went to check the contract and saw that it had been rewritten, and his escape clause had also vanished. While they kept exchanging mouth juices until sunset, she locked fingers with him and remembered changing his contract escape clause to a rule that canceled the contract whenever they locked fingers during the ritual. With his memories back, he got pissed and was trying to figure out what she had done when she asked who he was. Around the same time, Cana had finished getting her a good night's sleep and shot out of the ocean before blasting everything in sight. Moments later, a news broadcast came up after some videographers got footage of the city's airport being blown up and Cana hovering in the airspace above it. Hachizuka then ordered an immediate evacuation of all civilians before asking for Masaki. At Yukiri's cell shortly after, Masaki told her about the incident, and she initially refused to help, as she was still upset about getting arrested by a narcissist teen. Before leaving, she asked about the other companies, and he told her they had refused to show up, which made sense to her, as none of them were interested in fighting a little girl capable of spitting out Titan-class demons from her back. While the mayor struggled to give a straight answer to the press at a conference, the sisters looked through what had already been published and knew that a cover-up was impossible. Shenfa then told Linfa to focus on the local media, while denying ever knowing about Cana. Back at the hospital, Shu was struggling to believe that he did most of the things he could now remember. But he also noticed that some of the memories belonged to her and asked about it, but she didn't even remember her name. At a surveillance room, Masaki was with Yukiri looking at Cana when Hachizuka called in to give her permission to take her out. Yukiri then said she had no intention of ending the little girl she once changed diapers for, and Hachizuka told her to try capturing her alive if she could. By then, Shu had started to cry while asking Kisara why she gave up all the memories from her past and the ones they made together. She still didn't have any idea of what he was saying, so he hugged her and called her stupid for thinking her decision would make things better for him. He then gave her a kiss on the forehead and promised to be the one protecting her before taking her sword and leaving. Shortly after, Ayano was at the airport geared up when Sharon pulled up and told her a Celestial Abbey battleship was about to be deployed for a mission against the city. She explained that they were capable of sinking the entire city, but Ayano played it cool and acted like she had handled worse, so Sharon wished her luck and left. Outside the hospital, a delivery came in for Shu, so he got in the truck to check it out and told the delivery lady to take the money out of Hachizuka's card. Cana had started moving again, so Yukiri gave the order to commence fire, and the ground forces got her warmed up with a missile. The gunship then sprinkled a few more rounds, and they all watched as the smoke cleared and she was unharmed. Seeing that she wasn't trying to blow them up, Yukiri told them to keep firing, so they kept wasting ammunition until Ayano dialed in and told them to let her take a shot. The next moment, Cana stopped playing nice and tried to turn her into beef jerky. While Justice and the guys were watching the whole thing from the safety of their hideout, Kaya was reconsidering their decision to avoid the mission, so Rob reminded her of the risks it posed to them. Although Cana had stopped being peaceful, her only target was Ayano for some reason. Ayano kept shooting to save herself, but after the bullets easily bounced off Cana's face, she caught up to her and started charging up for a blast. Ayano's life started flashing, but then she got saved at the last moment by Shu and his fairy dust princess overboard. At a roof in the power plant moments later, he told her he had remembered their safe house session before telling her what happened with Kizora. She then asked him for the plan, and he told her Cana was probably already on the way after seeing him. She thought he wanted to fight his own sister and tried talking him out of it, but then Sharon showed up and told her she was actually Cana's target. During her years in chains, she had been connected to him through his dreams, and also recently saw Kisora's memories of all the times he clapped Ayano and Sharon. Hearing this, Shu dropped, realizing that he had created a monster due to his lack of self-control and addiction to clapping. Sharon was telling Ayano to find a place to hide when Cana blasted through a building in the plant and saw all the gunships and tanks waiting just for her. As she immediately summoned demons to handle them, Justice was still watching with the guys and started getting fed up. Rob then went to check on Kaya, and she was also struggling to contain her adrenaline rush. While Shu watched Cana, Sharon told Ayano she had only come back after he called her to apologize for the poisonous clapping. After reminding them of the approaching Abby's ship, they left to join the fight, and Shu finally went to say hi to his sister. Seeing that she didn't immediately roast him, Yukiri and Masaki discussed getting her to join them like Kisara. While Shu was telling her of his dream for the both of them to live together, she started to short-circuit. He then revealed that he wanted to seal her again, and Sharon captured her with the demon mech suit. After Ayano blasted her with another missile, Shu charged in with Kisora's sword, but Cana's recoil was too fast. She then pulled out her staff and started fighting him off until she put enough distance between them to load up a blast. Sharon then knocked her into a tank, and Ayano shot another missile, but she still powered up and blasted him. After managing to survive the first, she sent out energy beams that kept following him until they brought them back to her and clashed swords again. Using another missile blast, Ayano gave him an opening to land the hit, but then she teared up and distracted him long enough to counter with a gut-shattering punch that sent him crashing into the ground. Just then, Kizora showed up after seeing the reminder she wrote to herself before her amnesia. Once Shu regained consciousness, Cana charged in to finish him off, but Sharon saved him, leaving her open to Ayano's missile launcher. Once the dust settled, Shu tried attacking her again and got slammed into a tree. Ayano then started raining bullets on her, so she charged in to take her out instead, but then she got blocked by Kizora. While they took turns attacking each other, Shu thought Kizora had regained her memories, but Ayano told him she would have helped Cana take her out if she had them. After one of Cana's blasts pushed Kizora back, she found herself in Shu's arms, and didn't immediately try to clap him, which was all he needed to see to know that she still had her amnesia. Shu then told her of his plan to seal Cana away with the sword as she came down to face them. As she started blasting at Kizora, Shu distracted her with a shot from his gun, which left her open to an attack. She dodged and went back into the air, where Sharon was waiting with a dropkick that left her exposed to Ayano's missile launcher. The soldiers on standby then shot her up with every bullet in their artillery until she crashed into the ground. Masaki thought they were finally taking the upper hand, but Yukiri noticed that something was off. Cana started breathing erratically and suddenly released 3 A-class demons from her back portal. Yukiri immediately ordered them to stop the demons from getting to the city and started arguing with Hachisuka, who called in to give new orders. One of the demons slipped away and was heading straight for the city when it was force-fed a missile before Justice demanded to see its passport. The others then called Yukiri to tell her they would handle the city, and she promised to help them negotiate getting bonuses if they survived. She then told Ayano and Sharon to go help out in the city, as they were both utterly useless against Cana. She also told Shu to teach his sister some manners, so he went to discuss disciplinary measures with Kizara while Cana charged up. After taking her stance, Kizara started talking about how she felt drained, so he used his mouth juices to help her charge up. Once Cana saw them eating each other's faces, she got pissed and tried to blow them up, but Kizara canceled the attack after getting to maximum power. While Dominic and the rest of the gang hyped each other up despite initially hiding away like cowards, Kizara and Cana took their match into the air and kept attacking at power levels that blew up tanks like they were balloons. After getting close to them, Shu told Kizara to get her in position, so she kept attacking Cana until her back was facing him. With a single shot, he broke her horn, and she crashed into the ground. He was trying to finish her off when her powers went berserk, and an even stronger version of Asmodeus's arms scattered across the plant, destroying everything it touched. It then summoned Saduri's zombie again, but Kizara immediately chopped it to pixie dust before charging in and sticking her blade into Cana until her energy release died down. Kizara then told Shu to take care of her before leaving, and moments later, Justice and the gang got to the fully destroyed plant and started considering dropping their pride to finally accept Kizara's strength. Ayano and Sharon met up with her to discuss the danger she was in with the Abbey less than an hour away, and she told them she was tired of being hunted, so Ayano tried to comfort her. At the time, she was still digging through the debris and finally found Cana. She was still conscious enough to recognize him, so he immediately pulled her in for a hug. Days later, Yukiri was in a car with Masaki talking about the damage the city had taken from the battle. Achizuka was with his sisters at the time, talking about the countries that were aching to get in on the action and how they could escape being forced to share the core with the rest of the world. He then told them it was time to use their trump card and activated his sparkling negative aura alter ego. After getting to the office, Yukiri told Masaki that Cana had been sealed away somewhere under the city hall. That evening, Ayano walked Sharon to the docks and asked if she would be okay returning to the Abbey without fulfilling her mission. She then explained that she was too valuable to the cause to get fired, but also warned her off the possibility of an even stronger member of the Abbey being sent in her place. After getting on the boat, she told her she had given Shu one last taste of her throat game and drove off. Shu was at his parents' graves at the time, promising to continue working to clear their names while raising Cana, and left after also dropping a pack of cigarettes for whoever wanted to visit Miles. Kizara was waiting outside the cemetery to walk back home with him, and on the way back, she stopped to ask him to slowly help her relive their memories together. When they got back, he decided to start with an important part of their life and started an intense mouth juice exchange. Once she turned on the light, they saw Cana swallowing an entire buffet, while everyone at the city hall mobilized to find her. The next moment, the girls had drawn their weapons, but they decided to use verbal conflict instead. Shu was trying to figure out a way to stop them when Ayano busted in and threatened to blow Cana's head off. While Yukiri and Masaki waited outside, Ayano held both of them at gunpoint and told Cana to stop randomly escaping just to ambush Kizara and Shu. Somehow, they all ended up arguing again, and Shu tried to stop them, so they decided to face him instead. Seconds later, Yukiri watched as his place blew up and started considering retirement. Will Cana's constant sausage blocking lead Shu to consider permanently putting her on ice? Also, why was no one bothered by the fact that Shu and Kizara are actually blood-related? That is it for this video. Leave a thumbs up if you liked it and subscribe to the channel for similar content. And as always, thanks for watching.